John Taylor Gatto has been teaching in New York City schools for 26 years. Over these years, he has won the trust of his students, the resistance of many school administrators, and finally the acknowledgement of various political forces that what he has to say merits hearing. On January 31st, 1990, as John Taylor Gatto accepted their award as New York City Teacher of the Year, New York State legislators listened. At the least, it must have been confronting. Gatto tossed no bouquets of roses to the nation's culture or its school system. Let me share with you some of what Gatto said. He is speaking to all of us. We live in a time of great school crisis. We rank at the bottom of 19 industrial nations in reading, writing, and arithmetic. At the very bottom. Our teenage suicide rate is the highest in the world. And suicidal kids are rich kids for the most part, not the poor. This great school crisis is interlinked with a greater social crisis in the community. Children and old people are penned up and locked away from the business of the world to a degree without precedent. Nobody talks to them anymore. And without children and old people mixing in daily life, a community has no future and no past, only a continuous present. In fact, the name community hardly applies to the way we interact with each other. We live in networks, not communities, and everyone I know is lonely because of that. Time, private time. That is what our children need to discover who they are, to build themselves. Gatto has calculated the number of hours of private time left to the children he teaches after television and schooling devour their share. Out of the 169 hours in each week, children spend 55 hours watching television, only 1 hour less than they sleep. With the coming and going to school, with school classes and its homework, school consumes 45 hours, all under constant surveillance. If you allot 3 hours a week for evening meals, Gatto arrives at a net amount of private time for each child of 9 hours. In these 9 hours, we expect a child, in Gatto's words, to fashion a self, to create a unique consciousness. Gatto says, it's not enough, is it?
Schooling is a form of adoption. You give your kid away at his most, or his or her most plastic years, to a group of strangers. You accept a promise, sometimes stated and more often implied, that the state, to its agents, knows better how to raise your children and educate them than you, your neighbors, your grandparents, your local traditions do.
So Jefferson's second goal for schooling was to teach people how to defend their rights. I mean, even 13-year-olds, who I spent my life with, can call on a whole variety of alliances to defend their rights. But could we have junior high school confinement if we taught them their rights and how to defend their rights? I don't think so. Then Jefferson's other bag of justifications were that a schooling should teach you to be self-determining, to write your own script and not be intimidated by experts. I mean, we all have this finite amount of time on Earth. This finite amount of time when it's reasonably safe to stick your neck out and take risks. And it ought to be treated like something precious.
My partner Richard here has been a wonderful person in my life because he's taught himself how to do all kinds of things, and he's very self-reliant. And I, on the other hand, always flattered myself that I knew how to find the best expert whose assistance I could purchase.
That's what Harvard teaches you. You must have gone to Stanford, the Harvard of the West.
No, but something like that. And I'll tell you, at this ripe age in my life, it's been a real comeuppance to discover that I'm not so smart after all. That, in fact, I would have been a lot better off and much more secure in myself if I had learned to do things for myself and not be able to network for the best professional.
Yes.
One of my most popular programs on the air was a conversation I had with Kathleen Kenny, who's a woman out here who built her own house with her own hands.
Oh, I'd love to know her. I'd love to know her house.
Yes, it's gorgeous. It's a small house, and it's spectacularly well built and beautifully finished. And she designed it herself. It's octagonal, no less. It doesn't even have right angles in it. And she got through all the bureaucracy. She passed all the building and inspections and electrical and everything first time out.
If we just were able to broadcast that message to each other, not in a vapid or foolish way, but if we just said, nothing's very hard to do. I'll help you a little bit. And someone else help you a little bit, but you can help yourself almost all the way. Building your own house, God knows, Barbara, that's what we ought to be doing. Next to raising your own kids, what could possibly be more fulfilling, would teach you more, and then would pay you off for a more continuous length of time?
The theory of formal pedagogy that we learn from being taught is wrong in anybody's experience. We learn from self-teaching. There's some utility in having a coach, but nobody can educate you, and no school can educate you. It's a commitment you make to yourself. Now, what's happened in the public mind, though, is the propaganda of the institution has conveyed a false image of what an education is. It's not memorizing bits of fact.
At the first meeting of the Education Trust, the attendees included representatives of Rockefeller, Carnegie, Harvard, Stanford, the University of Chicago, and the National Education Association. The chief end of the new education, wrote Benjamin Kidd in 1918, was to, I'm quoting, impose on the young the ideal of subordination. The primary target of the first 30 years of forced schooling was the tradition of independent livelihoods in America.
And I tell you something, the faculty are a bunch of employees, and we're the raw materials. But we're a bunch of raw materials that don't mean to have any process upon us, don't mean to be made into any product, don't mean to end up being bought by some clients of the university, be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart, that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.